The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you. It's midweek edition. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Your friends at Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Numbers to get in today at 402-489-1240. 402-489-1240. Across the state where you hear us on the Hail Varsity Radio Network, 1-800-825-5865. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com and give us a follow on our own Twitter handles at Schmidt_radio at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. Pro Day today for Nebraska. Garrett Nelson, Trey Palmer, O'Shawn Mathis, just to name a few dudes that are trying to find their way onto a roster, onto a draft board. And we'll get there. Some comments from Garrett Nelson and Trey Palmer coming up. Husker Baseball. Aye. That's the sound effect. You have maybe other words or sounds made last night with Nebraska.
Jesus.
Possibly. Quite possibly that was a thought bubble as I watched and saw things go wrong in the ninth. 3 runs for Creighton. The wild pitch happens. And Nebraska loses to Creighton 6-5. Quite the celebration for the Jays. They found a way to keep fighting. Nebraska did enough offensively, but the bullpen falters again. We'll have some thoughts on that. Mike Babcock with us in about 15 minutes. Evan Bland will kick us off in hour 2. We'll spend some time on the recruiting weekend as we're talking 24 high-profile visitors. Mitch Sherman teased it yesterday. A little bit more from Mitch and his story on Dylan Raiola as you continue to size up the opportunity, the chances for Nebraska to land a program changer potentially at quarterback for Nebraska. We'll get there with Mike as well because he's seen so many quarterbacks come and go in Lincoln, and there's about 4 or 5 that you can circle. And it's not just ability, but it's also a timing thing. Where's the program at, and where can the program get to with that difference maker behind center? So we'll spend some time with Babbers on that. You have the numbers, you have the email. You want to watch the show, easy to do. Hail Varsity YouTube channel, subscribe to that. Great post pro day footage there with the great folks at Hail Varsity, Brady and Aaron Sorensen, of course, making that happen with the coverage. So the Hail Varsity YouTube channel can watch the show, get all the Husker content, video content you want. Twitter, give Hail Varsity Radio a follow at HVarsity Radio. Catch us in the afternoon. Damon and Andrew, Coffee and Cream in the morning. And then KFOR Facebook and Twitter. And there you go. Elijah, how you feeling? A lot of baseball yesterday between Nebraska and, of course, the World Baseball Classic. We'll get into some football here in a moment, but a lot of excitement in the showdown between Ohtani and his teammate, and it was pretty raucous for Japan and their celebration. Really well done and earned it. You're kind of sad and kicking yourself if you're the U.S., but you know it was well played. And then there's Nebraska where they just can't catch a break, and you got to make your own breaks. And it's been one thing after another. There's just not been the consistency on the hill once you get past a starter or even a middle relief guy. And sometimes the starter or middle relief's been a problem. That wasn't the case last night.
Well, get this. I caught about 8 1/3 innings, I guess, more than 8 1/3. I got to the bottom half of the 9th inning, and then at 9 o'clock my bowling league starts. Mm-hmm. So about 8:58, Nebraska goes to the pen, and I have to shut off the radio broadcast. And I go, well, Nebraska's got a 1-run lead. They're going to the bullpen. should go all right. And then I checked my phone about 10 minutes later, and it didn't go all right. But
did you really tell yourself it's going to go okay with the bullpen last night?
Well, I hoped that I was watching on TV at home, and then I flipped it on the radio in my car as I was driving to the bowling alley, and I decided that I was the bad luck, that by me listening on the radio, I was making everything go awry, and I went, well, you know what? They're going to the bullpen. If I get out of the car and stop listening on the radio, things will go all right. Turns out I did not have any sort of impact on the game whatsoever, which was unfortunate. And then I was like, well, Nebraska baseball lost. That'll give us something to talk about tomorrow, I guess, as much as it sucks. At least the U.S. is playing in the World Baseball Classic, and then I got to watch the last few innings of that up on the TV at Bowling League as well. So more disappointment there, but at least I bowled well. I bowled very well.
It's all about you.
Well, yeah, of course.
It's all about you last night.
We are now second in our league following a great performance last night. So feeling good there. Husker baseball, not feeling good about the bullpen still. I think the bats are just fine. We'll get into this a little bit more later, I'm sure. And then overall, the World Baseball Classic, the United States didn't win. But I think that tournament as a whole was a win for baseball fans everywhere. To get that kind of impactful baseball in March, a lot of high leverage situations with the stars of the game coming out. That was a resounding success in my mind. I'm excited for when this comes back in a couple of years. And
it's been great.
I've never
awesome lead into the opening day and season ahead.
So much more fun than spring training. That's the thing.
Totally it is. And I mean, it's got so much meaning. It's bragging rights. It's patriotism. I mean, it's all of those things. And I mean, you had great theater last night with Ohtani and Trout, and they got to go back to being teammates in that moment. With Nebraska baseball, they'll have a media session tomorrow with Coach Bolt. And you know, at this point in the season, Nebraska right now 11-7-1. You're 19 games in, and now it's conference season, so you have a chance to make some headway. But at this point, you should feel good about where you're at pitching, and Nebraska can't feel great. You just don't have the consistency, again, to repeat myself, where you want to know what you're going to get. And even if you do get a good performance, can you get a second good performance from guys you feel confident in? I mean, I feel horrible for the players and bad for the coaching staff just because they're still in search mode right now. And the offense is going to be good. It'll be able to win a lot of ball games for Nebraska. But that being said, you score 5 runs, that's enough to win. You still left 10 on in reality. And just I was listening to the broadcast last night on our affiliate 590, and you've got Brockett there, and he just, for whatever reason, couldn't find the zone, and he had 1 walk in 10 innings coming in, and Creighton's got the juices, the bags full because of consecutive walks. You have Hawkins come in for an inning and a third. He allows 2 hits. Walsh came in, solid enough, 6 innings, allowed 3 runs. But the problem was the back end. You had Sears come in, and just, you throw a wild pitch, you're likely going to try and aim it, unfortunately, or you're going to go back to your junk, and your probability of throwing another wild pitch is great. Just one of those nights for Nebraska where Creighton found some magic in that 9th inning to score 3.
It's still that issue with the bullpen, and Walsh did a great job coming in, retiring. I think it was 14 consecutive Blue Jays whenever he came in. He was awesome, but Nebraska still has that issue of whenever you need to go to the bullpen, you don't have that guy you can rely on to go get you 3 outs, which seems simple, but whenever you look at college baseball, the MLB, high-level baseball as a whole, you need a guy coming out of that bullpen that can come in, have 1 or 2 very good pitches, a good fastball, and then 1 good off-speed pitch. The type of guy that, you know what, he can pump it in the zone at 95, and then whenever you're sitting dead right on that fastball, you rip off a slider or a changeup or a curve, and boom, it's strike 3. You head into the bench. Nebraska doesn't have a guy like that. They don't have a guy that they can turn to. You know what? It's bottom of the 9th. We need 3 outs. Just go out there, throw these 2 pitches. That's all you need. I mean, look at some of the best closers in the league, from dating back to Mariano Rivera.
Mariano's where you always go. And look, he and Eckersley, my era, Mitch Williams, if you wanted to get crazy and smoke a pack of cigarettes, watching him close it down back in his day with the Cubs or Phillies because of your nerves. Listen, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to blow a save or 2 or 3, but your success rate's in the high 90%. And right now, Nebraska just does not have an answer. I mean, they got to keep – what do they got to do, put 2 touchdowns up a game? They got to score double digits a game to be safe.
That's what it feels like.
Right? And then there's been instances where they've scored a boatload of runs. If you go back to their opening weekend against San Diego, where it ended in a tie, but they blew a 6-run lead. That's obviously game 3. But right now you need to be making more headway. And Coach Christie right now, man, he's just got to be shaking his head. And he'll keep working with the guys. They'll hopefully, if you're a Nebraska baseball fan, get it figured out.
They just need to find that guy, or someone needs to differentiate themselves as being that guy that can come in and, you know what? You got 10 pitches. 10 pitches. Go hit the zone 10 times in the bottom of the 9th inning. Induce a couple foul-offs, some soft contacts. If you give up a base hit, it's okay. Just don't be throwing wild pitches. Pump it in the zone. Trust your defense behind you and do some contact. They don't have that guy right now. They just don't have a guy out of the bullpen that they can rely on to go get you 3 outs. And that's been the problem, because the hitting is not a problem right now. Bryce Matthews and Max Anderson are on fire. They're probably going to make themselves a lot of money this season based on how they've been playing. It's not an issue with run support. It's just an issue with pitching right now, and that's makes you want to beat your head into a wall whenever you watch it, because it's a good baseball team. Mm-hmm. I will still say that after last night, you've lost now in consecutive weeks to UNO and Creighton. I think you were the better team from my eyes watching those games, but you can't get it done at the end of the game. It's frustrating. I have a feeling they will get it figured out, but the clock's ticking. You're getting into Big Ten season. You can't afford many more slip-ups as the year goes on. Who's going to be that guy that's going to step up out of the bullpen and come deliver strikes? Because the starting pitching, when I watched on the weekend, that's not a problem. You even got a great performance from Walsh last night. Somebody stepped up and gave you good pitching performance, but who is going to step in and get you 3 outs?
You need, from a certainty standpoint in this Big Ten league, and I know Iowa's had some proud moments this year, and I know Maryland's kind of your barometer here for the Big Ten. You're still playing with fire more times than not if you don't finish in that top 3 in the Big Ten. And just to be safe, you better be in the top 2 of the Big Ten. Just saying. Let's spend a minute. We're talking about finding the guy. Dylan Raiola is the guy for a lot of college football programs, USC, Georgia, Nebraska. Really a good story from Mitch Sherman, more of a follow-up to his time down in Arizona. And listen, the in-person impressions are so valued by the Raiola family, and you couldn't ask for a better group to help navigate this I don't want to call it pressure, but this attention for a senior to be, because things have changed, and it is absolutely attention. There's social media, there's recruiting services, there's football services, there's Nebraska itself with the importance and attention and love affair put on the football program. And man, that's special, but that's a lot to take. That's a lot to take in. And what's been really pretty good from a Nebraska standpoint, per Mitch's reporting, is just how it's been handled by Nebraska, how Raiola has seen and kind of observed how Coach Rule's come across. Every coach in his right mind is going to talk family to a family like the Raiolas, because they're tight-knit, they're close, they love one another, and it's going to be, well, we're all about family here. Every coach says that. Every coach in his closet in college football has a T-shirt with the helmet logo right above the letters that spell out family printed.
Hey, it's in college basketball, too. You get those guys in NCAA tournament, they get the warm-ups.
We're all about family here, right? And you don't have to... You don't have to like all of your family, but you got to love them, okay? And I'm probably the like and the love discussion point in my family. But listen, the impression so far, again, per Mitch's reporting, is, okay, yeah, you're important. You're a potential domino for 4 top 50 guys. 4. And a slew of other high-level guys that can help win football games with the right development and mentality. There's all parts of this aside from just talent. How do you adjust to college, and can you go kill it in a league like the Big Ten? So I look at how the initial impression, all right, I'm going to go to your high school. You're my first stop here at Nebraska after getting hired down in Arizona. You're our staff's first stop is the high school down in Arizona. And then, Raiola is like, man, he's spending time with a lot of, with all the kids, not just my kid, because he's the number 1 quarterback in the country. So that's important. Are you the same guy you show yourself to be? Do you say what you do? Do you do what you say? And so far, it sounds like Raiola is that guy. What's going to be the difference here with Raiola? What is the sway to turn him into a Husker? What's the sway for Georgia? What's the sway for USC? We'll talk more about it. We'll get some thoughts from Mike Babcock, as he's seen a lot of game-changer quarterbacks. And we'll talk about some of those traits. Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity coming up here with Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity Midweek Edition. We're presented by Currency. Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. Welcome in Mr. Husker Football, historian, author, Hall of Famer Mike Babcock with us at MD Babs on Twitter. Can watch this interview, of course, on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel or the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter handle at HVarsity Radio, at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, how we doing?
I'm doing fine. I was wondering how Elijah's bowling team was doing, and now I can mark that one down.
Now we know. To Elijah's credit, he said we and not me.
Oh, it's definitely not me. I did do, we'll call it sandbagging at the beginning of the season just because I was bowling so horribly. So now I'm like just bowling closer to my own average, and it's really been helping our scores because it's a handicap, So I've been doing well there. That's been good after a really rough fall. So I've kind of put the rest of the league at a disadvantage with how poorly I bowled in the fall. But we've come back around, and now with my performance, my brother's been bowling great too. My dad's been above average. We've been soaring up to the top of the league. So
Babbers, it's all about that winter conditioning. I mean, it's all about the winter.
And you got to have a plan, and you got to stick to that plan.
You do. Let's talk about Raiola recruiting weekend, and we'll start there, Mike. And you've seen the game changer quarterbacks, and I was putting a list together here where you have Turner Gill and Tommy Frazier that were very profound with an already just fantastic football program, and their additions took Nebraska to a different level. Nebraska in the hunt, for sure, for conference championships, but then they went into the hunt for national championships with Gill and Frazier. I look at Steve Taylor and Crouch and Frost and even Zach Taylor, far more than just stabilizers or probably top 2 or 3 in the league. They were elite. They were really, really good quarterbacks. And I look at some other guys that were one-year wonders because they were patient and waited their turn, McCant and Godowski. So I've got 3 different categories. Do you see this? Do you see parallels with Raiola and the potential to take Nebraska back to the direction of contender when you look at what he is in comparison to a Gill or a Frazier, at least the hype around it?
Well, yeah, and I would throw Joe Gans in there too.
Thank you. Joe Gans fan club.
Guy,
yes,
remarkable that he stuck around and was there to have that opportunity. But yeah, I think obviously Raiola has the talent. He is an elite player, an elite quarterback. That's obviously a place that you start on offense, but it's the people around him that makes him successful. You bring in an elite quarterback and you put him behind an offensive line that can't get the job done, he's not going to look like an elite quarterback at that point. So, that's one of the things that has to be a point of emphasis. I think it is. We've talked about that before, but certainly bringing in a player like Dylan Raiola, and then that has a ripple effect, I think, because you see other top-ranked players look at that and say, well, he's going to Nebraska. Maybe I would really consider that. And so I think it has that kind of effect on your recruiting. But the bottom line is, for the coaching staff, you do what you do with the players that you're able to get in. And, I don't know if we've talked about it or if you watched it, but the round table with Tom Osborne, Matt Rule, and Trev Alberts, one of the things that was reinforced there was Tom Osborne talking about, developing players, not always having the best, highest rated players come in, but having the players that fit your system. And I think that probably in this case, as the system is developing, as Matt Rule is installing that system, Dylan Raiola would fit it because it's a work in progress right now, I think. Everybody's learning, starting again to learn what it is that Matt Rule wants to do. So there's that factor as well. But the attention that your program would draw from bringing in a player like that would have the repercussions beyond just one guy, the other players that are coming in. But on the other hand, you've got to develop and play with the guys that you are able to get. So if it turns out that Nebraska isn't successful in recruiting them, you move on and you play with what you have. It's interesting, Turner Gill, certainly I think he was a key to the national championships in that he could run or pass. He was an option type quarterback. It came down to Nebraska and Oklahoma with him, and there was some talk that Oklahoma really wanted him as a defensive back. But that was a tough get for Nebraska because Oklahoma was in the conversation as well. Getting Turner Gill was a key factor, I think, and you can take it right along there. It was Turner Gill, and it was Steve Taylor, and it was Tommy Fraser, right on to those national championships because of that run offense that Osborne went to when he saw that that's the way to beat Oklahoma was to play the way Oklahoma did.
Mike Babcock's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, when you look at Dylan's recruitment, I just want to follow up on what you had to say about what that can do for Nebraska's recruiting should Dylan be in. If Dylan picks somewhere else, USC, Georgia Tech?
USC, Georgia.
USC, Georgia. If he picks one of those two, can Nebraska still get some carryover effect, in your opinion, just from the fact that, national media services are talking about the possibilities of Dylan Raiola to Nebraska? I mean, it's out there that Raiola is considering Nebraska. Can that do anything to improve the recruiting acumen of Nebraska, or does it have to be a commitment from Raiola?
No, I don't think it has to be. I think that the acknowledgement that Nebraska is involved in it has some effect. But, the bottom line really, again, goes to Matt Rule and his staff and their aggressiveness in recruiting and getting the guys that are going to fit their system. And if you can get an elite guy that fits your system, it just magnifies the recruiting, I think. And I don't think you lose all of that if you don't get him.
Mike, listen, I think the playing field is leveled because of Rule, his staff, Raiola being on staff. I mean, that really, really helps when we talk family and its importance. I mean, without Raiola, Nebraska couldn't put their best foot forward, but this really, really helps from a comfort and familiarity standpoint. And when we talk about the sway factor, USC is going to get great offense. They're going to have that supporting cast you're talking about. SC's offensive lines have been really good in pass protection. They've got NFL wide receivers. You play in the Rose Bowl. You are going to win a Heisman. That's what you do under Lincoln Riley the last 7 years. You look at what's going on at Georgia. You're back-to-back champs. You've been incredible in the league, the toughest league in college football, and you've got an insanely talented defense that complements your offense. You've got a run game, and they don't ask their quarterbacks. They're capable of doing it to go crank out a 25 for 30 day for 400 yards, but they've got a stable of running backs and a slew of tight ends to go find. And voila, it's great. You're deep, you're talented, you're fast, you're physical. It's all hitting on all those cylinders. You have that relationship at Georgia that they were the first. They were the first to reach out and offer Raiola. So it's interesting to see these different dynamics, Mike, where Nebraska fits in their niche, USC's niche, and then also Georgia's niche. Comment on this three-horse race as we speak right now.
Well, again, now you got Donovan Raiola was the one assistant coach that Matt Rule retained. And when Matt Rule came in, I remember one of his early news conferences, he said some of the criticism of the offensive line he didn't see necessarily was justified, but he thought that the pieces were there, that they could develop the kind of offensive line that you needed to protect that quarterback. So I'm not discounting Nebraska because of that. I don't want to say, well, that offensive line has no potential and that's going to be a factor in how a quarterback that might come in here, how he's going to be effective or not effective. Because I do believe that the Rule has belief in the potential of the offensive line, and if you can keep guys healthy, get guys healthy under Donovan Raiola, I think the offensive line can be good. And then you've got multiple running backs. I think the top 4 rushers from last season are back, although one of them is not currently practicing, I guess, with the team. And you've got several wide receivers, and you've got, you're going to have to identify some tight ends because they said that Matt Rule indicated that multiple tight ends is something that they're going to do, or Satterfield said that. So the pieces are there. And, so I don't just say, well, the pieces are better at USC, or USC has a tradition of offensive linemen or whatever, or Georgia, certainly. How do you dispute what Georgia has done?
You don't.
Back-to-back national championships. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. But you don't compete necessarily against that. You compete with what you have to offer and what you believe in your own program. That's where you go. And you don't try to say, don't go to Georgia because they have X, Y, and Z. Don't go to USC because they have X, Y, and Z. Come to Nebraska because this is what we have, and this is how we look at our culture and how you fit into that.
Mike Babcock's with us here. And Mike, last thought, about 30 seconds left here before we got to get you out. What's more important this week? Is it the recruiting weekend or is it the first week of spring practices? If you're Matt Rule or a member of the coaching staff, what do you rank as being more important?
I think spring practice. I think getting that thing, focus on the guys that you have. You have to do that. That has to be your first priority, and then the recruiting.
Babbers, great recent issue. I'm going to hold it up for the folks watching the interview here on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Awesome issue this week here with Hail Varsity Magazine. Get that subscription, hailvarsity.com/offer.
There it is.
Get the print. Hey, I'm doing all right,
Get
man.
yourself a deal if you're listening at home.
Strikes. I'm throwing strikes with the offer, /offer. Is where you subscribe. Digital and print, you'll love it. Husker fan, if you're thinking about, how am I going to get my info? Can I get my info and hold it as well as digital? Get the magazine. Babbers,
no wild pitches.
No wild pitches. Not today. No Wild Pitch Wednesday. Mike, thanks for the time, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Good stuff from Mike Babcock on the Gill Frazier Raiola parallel. Get that downloaded. It is free with Hail Varsity's podcasts, segments, or the whole show, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Twitter as well, at HVarsity Radio. Let's get into Pro Day. You got Travis Vokalek, O'Shawn Mathis, Garrett Nelson, a slew of other Huskers that performed. Trey Palmer, of course, was one of 3 Huskers that got to go to the Combine, along with Vokalek and Mathis. And, I really hope these guys will find a niche in the league and have a great career wherever they land, whether they're drafted or they're undrafted free agents. Let's start out with Garrett Nelson. The connection with Garrett Nelson's awesome, and Aaron Sorensen has done a great job covering Garrett in her time. And I remember sitting in the rail yard ready for the recruiting show. And this was video streamed, and we did the old FaceTime thing. And Garrett's walking down the halls of high school on signing day, and he's with us, and then consecutive bells ring of the time we're doing the interview. It's lunchtime in Scotts Bluff, and he's sitting there, and he's just smiling, got the long hair going, and three bells just go off as we're trying to answer questions. And he's always been a great dude, and his football ability and effort and motor is big or better than the person he is. And I can't say enough good things about Garrett Nelson, so I really, on a personal note, want him to find a spot, have a great career, and have a happy post-Nebraska time, because he left everything and anything on the field in his time here, and he's a guy that didn't get the wins and the payoff he deserved.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I remember, that's your first memory. My first memory of Garrett Nelson, I was working for Husker Vision. I was sitting up in the press box. We were just trying out the new light system for night games where, all the lights flicker after touchdowns and whatnot. And I'm up there running it for the Class B state title game, in which Scotts Bluff was participating. And I remember seeing this wild man on the outside for Scotts Bluff defense just blowing up everything for, I think it was Scott. I believe Scott was on the other side of the field.
It was probably Scott.
And he was just blowing up everything in the backfield for them. And we were just talking up in the press box, and I was like, well, he's got the mentality of a football player. And I thought at the time he was still a little skinny, needed some things to work on. And little did I know, next year he's making plays on special teams and starting to make plays on defense. And one of those first guys that was younger than me, which is weird getting into college, that I can now go see graduating and going off to the NFL.
Fast forward a few years.
Yeah, so it's weird that I was a college student watching him as a high schooler. That's just the weird me getting older type feeling where it's, well, he's going off to the NFL now, and I'm doing radio here in Nebraska. I'm enjoying my life, don't get me wrong, but it's weird to see Garrett Nelson, just the body transformation that he's made, the type of transformation he's made as a man, and what he's meant to Nebraska football over the past 4 years. It's exciting to see what the future may hold for him after today's Pro Day performance.
Here is a little bit of Garrett Nelson. Was asked how Pro Day went and dealing with the pressure around it. It is your audition with all those NFL scouts watching.
Felt really good, felt smooth and fast, and had some good feedback from scouts, and they said it was a great workout, so I'm happy with how everything went. I kind of equated it to like a boxer getting ready for a title fight. You train 3 months, and then it's one day, or 2 hours, so you can put a lot of pressure on yourself, but I woke up with the attitude, like, man, I get to go do Pro Day. This is so sweet. I get to have all these teams watch me and work out, so alleviated a lot of the pressure, plus had drafting all those guys there, so it was fun to do that with my teammates.
So how did he perform? Cut 3 here. He was asked what stuck out, and did you put your best foot forward? Did you do what you needed to do?
I felt like I did really well in the 40, but where the change of direction, short distance stuff is definitely where I make my money, and felt like I did really well in the 5.10.5 and 3. I heard an alleged 4.6 that I'm not going to do not put me on record at all for that. That is a total, I have no idea, but I heard 4.6, 4.7.
I'm an alleged 6 flat.
I am.
You're probably a little over 5, aren't you?
Back in my prime, maybe.
Okay.
I haven't run 40 yards consecutively in a long time.
Yeah. Not since it was happy hour and, there's a free beer to be had. That's when my burst kicks in.
Every single year I watch the combine with Rich Eisen going and running the 40-yard dash. They put him up next to the linemen. And I always remember thinking back in high school, man, how can somebody
how can a building run that fast?
I was like, how can a guy in decent shape in Rich Eisen run that slow and a 300-pound plus guy run that fast? And then I got older and I realized those knees don't last forever.
So this was pretty comical, and you're going to get all sorts of questions. And we'll talk to Jay Moore next week, because his next door mate was beast mode at the combine.
Yeah, Marshawn Lynch. But the old Ask Me Anything, and what was some interesting questions that the NFL interviewers had for Garrett Nelson.
Everything kind of weird. They asked me what's the worst thing I've done. They asked me what I want on my headstone, and then they would be like, "Tell me about yourself," and then there would just be background, or we'd talk football. It's been everything. So there hasn't really been one consistent question.
What do you want on your headstone?
I said to the best friend anybody could have, because I want to be the best friend that I could be to anybody. So.
Pretty deep. What do you want on your tombstone? And this isn't the sausage pepperoni question. This is the, go big red. Here lies so-and-so. I mean, that's something you just don't hopefully ponder a lot. What do you want on your grave? And here comes somebody off the top rope from the NFL. Hey, man, what do you want on your tombstone?
An interesting question to ponder. It still doesn't take the crown, though. There were some players coming out of the combine talking about the weird questions they got, and the weirdest one I heard, which if someone asked me on the spot, what would you put on your headstone? Like, I don't know. I'm too young for that. I haven't even thought about that. But the one that I thought was really interesting was an NFL team asked, I'm trying to think off the top of my head who the player was. I can't remember. But they were asked, okay, what's your favorite fast food restaurant? And he says Chipotle. And the NFL team goes, okay, now imagine you walk into Chipotle and it's absolutely packed. You get your bowl, your burrito, whatever, and you're trying to go find a table, and you find one table that's got napkins sitting on it. Nobody's sitting there.
Do you sit down?
No, the question was, do you take those napkins and throw them away and get your own napkins, or you just sit down and use those napkins as if they're your own? Like, what are you trying to gather from that? There's so many great stories like that.
Are you a neat freak? What's your detail level like? Are you lazy? I mean, I don't know. There's so many inferences that you can
take away from that.
You can judge, but it is absolutely specific and not really important.
Like, is the question trying to figure out if you'd wait and see if somebody was using those napkins to save the table, or what are you trying to ask with that?
Fair question.
But that's why I get all these NFL crazy combine questions. Is what were you trying to gather from that?
Mm-hmm. Just how they answered it, and what's the application with your security staff and the psychologist on staff? Well, the answer's this way. Pass on him. We'll wind down hour one with Hail Varsity.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Some final thoughts on Pro Day. Evan Bland is 10 minutes away from the Omaha World Herald. We'll talk more Dylan Raiola at 5:25. And last thought here from Garrett Nelson as he wrapped up Pro Day with Nebraska. Had a good showing today. Where do you fit? Where do you land? Where's your future position-wise in the NFL when you transition?
It's usually 3-4 outside linebacker, Sam. I've heard a couple. Some people are like, "You're the non-prototype DN." And I'm like, "Yeah." So I could do. I think I've been blessed, especially with my time here. I've done everything. I was in a 3, I was in a 30, I was in a 0, I was stand-up rushing, stand-up dropping, I was down hand in the dirt, 4-5, 6-9, rushing, dropping, and everything. So I have so much versatility. I've done so many different jobs on defense that I think teams recognize that versatility, and they can use me wherever they want.
So that is a benefit to seeing it all and about doing it all, from special teams to being a guy his size and going up against some of the girthier dudes in the Big Ten with his hand in the dirt, but also the athleticism to be able to be on that outside and drop. So that's an asset. That's a differentiator for me if I'm an NFL team. And Garrett Nelson.
And the thing with Garrett Nelson that I really see is almost that Will Compton mold of, a lot of undrafted guys. Go make yourself an asset on special teams. That's how you're going to go make a roster if you're Garrett Nelson. There's noted limitations within his game that NFL teams see, particularly. I look at bend around the outside. He's got a lot of strength. He's got some speed. He's showed it at Nebraska. He's been a special teams guy. Go make yourself valuable on special teams, make a roster, and then go from there. That's kind of the Will Compton mold for making an NFL career. Started on special teams. You know what? You get a chance at linebacker. You keep on working. You're going to earn yourself a second contract as a linebacker instead of a special teamer. There's ways to make the NFL, and I think Garrett Nelson would be wise to follow that mold of Will Compton. If you know what, whatever you ask me to do, I'll do it.
Compton and Giff, two really good comps to try and chase. Trey Palmer, we know what makes him special is his speed. And Trey Palmer after pro day today.
Yes, sir. I feel like I did every route crispy, clean, ran good, did the shuttles good, 3-cone good.
So that was Palmer on his performance. Let's talk about the 40 time. And Elijah and I are imagining running something below a 6 with a 40, and Trey wasn't happy with his 40 back in Indy.
Everybody was impressed with your time. Were you impressed with it?
No, I was mad at my time, really. I wanted a 4.2.
I wanted a 4.2. I love that.
so do I. Yeah, I wanted a 4.2 once upon a time. More from Palmer here on what he wanted to show the scouts today.
Really just showing the scouts that I can, be versatile, really catch it. I'm back in Nebraska now. Really just show the scouts that I can really do everything, catch every ball, run every route crispy.
And how about where you want to go? Where do you want to be drafted if you're Trey Palmer?
I haven't focused on that. I've just been focusing on me.
Where do you hope to go?
Anywhere they can throw the ball.
Just throw the ball. Just anywhere they can throw the football.
He's so funny.
He's
like
a good dude.
I always think about that interview following the Iowa game. What'd you see out there? Well, I saw they can't guard me. I said, throw it up. They can't guard me.
There's a smile by a lot of Nebraska coaches and fans when they think of Trey Palmer and him.
That dude's going to go make some noise in the NFL.
Lighten it up. Hour 2, Evan Bland, Hail Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hour 2 at Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We don't know if he ran the 40 today or not, but we're going to ask him. We say hi to Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald, at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter. Evan, what was your time today?
Well, my word per minute count was probably in the 70s. I can give you that one. But yeah, I mean, you got to stretch out before you do those things. If I ran up there cold, my hammies aren't quite what they used to be. So you gotta stretch that out a little bit. But no, I'm not approaching Trey Palmer 4.3 territory. But it's fun to see those guys rip it up. I was more of a distance guy anyway, so I'm more of a long-term sort of approach to running, I guess.
Well, this gets me thinking. A Nebraska football media combine / pro day where they get all the Husker media members together.
I'm out, dude.
You're
no
out?
way.
Come on.
No, we need a nebulizer, a nurse, and something else, a beer. Those are the 3 requirements I have. Not going to happen. I will talk about it.
I don't know how well any of us, I guess I can just speak for myself, but I don't know how well I would test on those specific drills, but like give me something like I can be scrappy in and competitive in, like I'll take on Matt Rule and some ping pong. Like let's go, let's do something like that, or a game of horse. Let's hang.
What about tug of war? Somewhere in between. It's a little bit physical, but it's really mental too.
It's workers' comp, isn't it? Just screaming workers' comp.
Yeah, something like that. We can get creative with it. Find some kind of media Olympics. I think people would watch that, but probably not for the reasons that we would hope.
No.
It'd be to laugh at everybody.
Oh,
yeah.
they would be betting on who fails, who drops out. I mean, that's absolutely how it'd go, and that'd be all right. No, we'll have to huddle up on this. Evan, some impressions though of Pro Day today. Who stood out? What were some of either the times or the numbers that impressed you with guys that we're thinking about on Sunday, and maybe some guys that, all right, maybe they got on the NFL radar because of today? And I ask specifically, just saw on Twitter, just what type of explosive athlete Oliver Martin is. I mean, he's one guy that he's got a lot of skills, man.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we haven't gotten the results from Nebraska. Typically, they release those numbers. The 40 times are always tricky because each NFL scout that is there keeps their own time, so those are not like laser timed or anything like that. So you can kind of just approximate what that is. But one of the measurables that we did have, because we could hear them yell it on the field, was the broad jump that Oliver Martin had, which was 11 feet 2 inches. And you check out the results that came out from the NFL Combine among all participants, that would have tied for fourth. So, I mean, we knew that Oliver Martin was an explosive athlete. He tested highly in the off seasons previously at Nebraska and elsewhere. But I mean, that was just on display again, how explosive he can be. So you got to think that gets somebody's attention. As they say, you just need one opportunity out of 32 teams to make a career. And so, maybe Oliver Martin took a step forward today. Beyond that, it's kind of hard to say. Trey Palmer didn't run the 40, probably a smart move considering that he had that 4.33 at the Combine earlier in the month, and so you don't want to maybe risk that. But he went through some of the other drills, the vertical and whatnot, and by his account, came away fairly happy, I think, with some of those other testing drills that he had. And I think Garrett Nelson was probably the story of the day. I mean, he was what you would probably call an NFL Combine snub. He should have been there, I would think. He wasn't. He used it as fuel to improve and prepare for Pro Day, and I think he felt like he put his best foot forward doing a lot of the pro agility drills and different things like that. So, that part stood out to me. But, I personally, guys, was curious, too, to see how this Pro Day would compare to some of the previous ones with the new staff. And what does it look like when your head coach, who's hanging out, and most of the assistants weren't the coaches for these guys who are testing in some of these biggest moments of their football lives. And so it was kind of cool to hear, even chat a little bit with guys like Cam Jurgens and Austin Allen, who were back, and hear about how they would have a conversation with Matt Rule on the field, and how he would tell them, look, come back whenever you want, whatever you need. I think that's just another little hint, little clue that this is a staff that gets it, that understands that just because a lot of these guys maybe weren't their guys doesn't mean that they don't deserve the support and everything that goes into that too. So I think that element, in addition to what a lot of the guys did on the field, made today's Pro Day a little bit more unique.
Evan Bland is with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, to combine today's Pro Day with a big upcoming recruiting weekend, I want to bring you to a topic that we discussed a little bit yesterday, and that's just what kind of talent Nebraska currently has on the roster. I think it's a safe bet to say Nebraska has 2 draft picks in this year's draft, maybe 3. Kind of depends on that Vokalek and Garrett Nelson aspect. But whenever you look at Nebraska's current roster, how many future first-round draft picks you think Nebraska has on the roster? Because when you look at the top 15 and the top 25 in the country, that's a pretty consistent theme, is all those teams have 1, maybe 2 guys that are fringe first-round guys or are solid future first-round picks, and I'm not sure I can spot one on the roster right now, so I want to get your take. How many future high-level draft picks do you see on Nebraska's roster as it stands today?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought exercise, isn't it? Like, I still go back to what Matt Rule has said about position changes and how sometimes that unlocks potential in guys that maybe they didn't see in themselves. And so, a guy like Tommy Hill, who was a DB, and then he was a receiver, now he's back at DB. Like, he has all the raw ability to be a guy who could go highly in the draft. But, how has he developed? How has he brought along? How has he coached up? Like, all that sort of plays into it. So he's a guy that kind of comes to mind. You think about how top-heavy the tight end room could potentially be. I mean, Thomas Fidone and Eric Gilbert, if those guys realize their potential and come along physically and all that, like, you could see a path where they would be prominent players in an NFL draft in a couple of years. MJ Sherman would be another guy who would come to mind. I think Chief Borders, both those transfer linebackers have the physical tools and the mental makeup. And so, again, like, as we've seen at Nebraska for so long, talent and recruiting classes and stars are a nice start, but that's not the end of it. You got to develop, you got to find a system, you got to find an identity, all that stuff. And so I think Nebraska has sort of the raw materials, so to speak, to do it with a number of these guys that we talked about. Now it's a matter of refining that and moving it forward. And so, I think they could have a couple. It just depends on how things break and how things go here in the next couple seasons.
And Evan, what stands out to me about that answer quickly is you listed 5 guys. 4 of them have been added to the roster within the past 12 months, and 3 of those guys have been added within the past 3 months, which I just think is interesting to note based on the guys that were top of mind for you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, there was a talent influx that was necessary. There's no doubt about it. I mean, how long, you think about the last 4, 5, 6 years for Nebraska and all the struggles that they had. I mean, how many times did you put your hope in a freshman and say, man, okay, this guy's it, right? And then it doesn't happen right away, and he kind of plateaus as a sophomore, and that's the end of it. Like, that's sort of the opposite of what Matt Rule has been known for, which is bringing in guys maybe a little more unheralded. By the time they're sophomores, juniors, seniors, they're playing their best football. And so, you think again about the guys who have the recruiting stars, who have the physical ability, they look the part. Now can you bring them along? And I do think they have some guys. I'll throw out another couple. I think the running back room could have some guys who could break it. I'm a big A.J. Allen fan. I think he, before he was injured, flashed as a guy who could be a real playmaker in the Big Ten. Gabe Irvins is somebody else who, maybe the fastest guy on the team. And so how do you use him, and how do you deploy him in a way that, he's going to have some film for NFL scouts down the road. But, I think they have the parts. I think they really brought in some guys in this incoming class that have the measurables that aren't even on campus yet. So we'll see how it plays out. But again, like, this coaching staff has a track record of doing it. So you get the raw materials, and now it's just about how do you mold that into something that NFL teams are going to want to chase after.
The here and now is Pro Day, and you have a team made up of some transfers and guys that you get to coach if you're Matt Rule. Also this weekend, Evan, going to go to the Junior Day, and a lot of buzz, deservedly so, with so many top 50 guys, top 100 players. Of course, Dylan Raiola, the headliner there. What's your take here on how Nebraska's been able to accumulate all these high-level, high-projected dudes to get in here as juniors here this weekend?
Yeah, it's impressive and, in some ways unprecedented for what Nebraska's been able to do. I mean, you think about some of their biggest kind of tentpole recruiting events in recent history. You think about some of the Friday Night Lights camps in the summer and maybe a few official visit weekends in the fall. But to attract this kind of a junior day crowd, I think is unique in one sense because this is a group of guys that want to be here. These are not official visits where all expenses are paid and you get to roll out the red carpet and be treated like rock stars at a game. Like, this is, you pay for your own trip. You show up. A lot of these guys are driving in. They're regional prospects, not all of them, but a lot of them. And, you get to have them just kind of hang around each other. So there's a little bit more of a a natural sort of vibe to this weekend, and you can just sort of envision it, right? Where you've got Dylan Raiola, you've got a handful of other high 4-star or high 3-star prospects sort of milling around, and it's just easy to get to talking and say, man, what if we lived here? What if we played together? What if we spent every day in this facility that we're touring right now? Like, it's easy to dream, I think, if you're a 17-year-old kid surrounded by other high-level elite athletes. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a weekend that will probably produce some commits rather quickly, and I think it'll be a weekend that'll sow the seeds for future success, a month, 2 months, 5 months down the road when some of these guys are willing to commit. But, there's a power, I think, in the message of a first-year staff at any school. There's sort of a window where, you can't sell anything tangible because you haven't played a game yet, but you can sell hope, you can sell vision, you can sell track record. And Matt Rule and his staff have clearly done that by persuading so many of these high-level guys to come in. You see guys from Texas. You see a lot from the state of Kansas or the St. Louis area. So you can kind of get a sense, too, of what they're emphasizing in terms of geography. But it's a huge weekend, and I think, if this staff holds true to form from what they've been so far, they're going to maybe try to find a way to be competitive and find a way to let these guys have fun and forget about the fact for a few minutes that they're high-level recruits and that they're football players who are ready to see what they can do in college. So it'll be really interesting to see what it produces.
Evan, couple minutes before we got to say goodbye. Great stuff there on the visit weekend. Husker Baseball, tough one last night, 3 runs in the 9th. Creighton walks off on a wild pitch.
Yeah, it was a gut punch. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Creighton has owned this series the last handful of years. I mean, they didn't meet in 2020 or 2021 with pandemic stuff, but it felt like last night Nebraska was going to break through. I mean, they took the lead there in the 3rd inning. The offense rose up. You felt like maybe they'd pull away a little bit more, and it didn't happen. And, for 8 innings, the story was Will Walsh and the fact that a two-way guy who had 2 career college innings to his name had turned away 15 straight Blue Jays and was cruising, and, a couple singles in the 9th. And then they go to the bullpen again. You got a pass ball, a wild pitch, a sac fly, and it all just sort of snowballed. But I think in the bigger sense, it just sort of accentuates the fact that Nebraska needs to find some more trustworthy arms. I mean, Emmett Olson and Jace Kaminska are legitimate aces in the Big Ten, and they're going to give Nebraska a chance, I think, in every game that they're out there. But beyond that, who do you trust? I think Will Walsh, definitely earns some more high-leverage opportunities moving forward. But the bullpen has been problematic, to say the least, with command, just the ability to throw strikes. And so, hopefully for Nebraska's sake, maybe this is the game that you do remember that Will Walsh sort of entered that circle of trust as a late inning guy. But now you got to start winning some games. They're going to have an opportunity this weekend with Illinois coming in. It's their best home series of the season, in my opinion. Illinois is off to a pretty good start itself, and so now the challenge becomes win the weekends for Nebraska in the Big Ten, and I think they'll have a chance to do it. It should be a fun series moving forward here with the Illini too.
Evan, quickly, 30 seconds here. The issues within the bullpen, do you see that as a talent issue or a mentality issue? It seems that they crack in high-leverage moments.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's some mentality side to it because ability-wise, I mean, you can just kind of go down the list and say a lot of these guys have done it before. They produced. I mean, we've seen what Shea Shanneman can do and Kyle Perry can do. We've seen what Brett Sears could do at other places. He struggled last night. So, yeah, I think it's contagious in a lot of ways. If you can find some success, you go with it, and it sort of mounts. Nebraska just hasn't really had that game yet, so maybe it starts this weekend.
Evan, take care. We'll see you soon. Thanks for the time today, bud.
Thanks, guys.
There he is, Evan Bland with us, Omaha World Herald, Hail Varsity Radio. Good stuff from Evan. We'll talk some more. Visit Weekend next.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good sit down there with Evan Bland. Can find him and Mike Babcock on the podcast. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Hail Varsity Radio. Subscribe. It don't cost you nothing. you just have a chance to listen to the full show or the segments you like. And also watch Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Get all your Pro Day recap with the great folks at Hail Varsity. Check that out. Hail Varsity Radio Twitter as well. Give that a follow at HVarsity Radio. Reminder to get you buckled up. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances if you drink? Don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Visit weekend is huge. Pro Day today. You've got the talent in, talent out equation going on right now where guys hope to make a name and showcase. That was done today at the indoor facility. This weekend you've got Junior Day on a lot of other dimes, not Nebraska's, to try and put together an incredible 2024. The weekend is so vital, and Nebraska's done a, dare I say, impressive job. It's more than impressive to get this list here. We'll have a finalized list from Brady Oltmans on Friday when we talk to Brady. But, I mean, Dylan's headlining it. You've got other studs. You've got 4 in-state kids that are wow ball players. That is a monster weekend on itself. And we started the show talking about, what's going to sway Dylan Raiola. You've probably got 6 to 8 weeks, presumably, if you're him, to make a call. You can call USC, Georgia, Nebraska. You can make a decision whenever you want. But typically, going into your senior year, quarterbacks are going to decide. Put yourself in Dylan's shoes, right? We were joking about being able to someday run a great 40. We had a good yuck about the media combine. That'd make a lot of people sick, especially if, I roll out there with my shirt off like Garrett did. Little difference in physique. Elijah's trying not to think visually. But, no, put yourself in Dylan's shoes. What's going to sway you? All right? Uncle and hope and rule and plan and track record and Nebraska and be the guy. Accept and embrace that pressure. Accept and embrace the, dude, you're going to turn this thing around and it's going to be okay again. I mean, that's the narrative. You've been to Georgia 6 times. You're there, presumably, because of Stafford and how tight your dad and Stafford were, and that's where Stafford went. And it's real easy for Stafford to say, dude, remember my old center, Dom? Yeah, his kid's awesome. Get him a scholarship. Georgia's smart enough, the way they've recruited and developed and sent guys to the league. They knew it before probably a phone call from Matt Stanford. But there's the Georgia connection. And then you get to USC, where, all right, yeah, I'm Lincoln Riley. You've been out to L.A. a lot of times throwing the ball. You've been to USC 100 times. I don't know that's the number, but it feels like it. And I put 2 number 1 overalls into the NFL. I've gotten to Major League Bowl games, either Oklahoma or USC. You're going to have a ton of talent around here. Yeah, we're moving to the Big Ten in a couple of years. But, hey, you've been to Lincoln, so you know the Big Ten. But the thing that is an issue, I mean, it seems like, this Malachi Nelson that's the 5-star is the heir apparent to Caleb Williams. Now, Caleb Williams was a high-profile guy that didn't start out for Lincoln Riley, but they went to the bullpen and he transferred to USC from Oklahoma. So just because you didn't win the job doesn't mean you don't eventually get a chance to take the job. Williams is that example under Riley when you have a whole quarterback room of 4- and 5-star guys. So it's an interesting dynamic with each spot. We talked Georgia, USC, and Nebraska. And if I'm putting myself in this guy's shoes, I mean, we go back to family. And family's the decider, the difference maker for me. And listen, signing day is not till December, Elijah. You have a chance to see what type of product in a year one, in a transition year, Nebraska turns out to be. You get a glimpse of what this team can be. All right, where do we go if I were to join that?
Yeah, and it kind of, I think this weekend's going to be huge because one of the things you can glean from Mitch's story, which obviously check that out on The Athletic, love Mitch Sherman, was that really the relationship between Dylan Raiola and Matt Rule does lag behind the likes of Kirby Smart in Georgia and Lincoln Riley in USC because, I mean, the extent of their, at least on the record, recruiting has been a quick conversation down in Arizona whenever Matt Rule came down and visited and got to watch him throw. You got to have a quick conversation there. You apparently didn't have any conversation whenever Dylan was in Lincoln for that Minnesota basketball game. You apparently didn't have any conversation there, at least on the record. You got to talk to each of the coordinators briefly, similarly to Rule. They get to come watch a workout and you get to briefly talk to them there. He's had, what is the number now? Is it 5 different visits to Georgia at this point where he's got to meet with 6 total to go meet with Kirby Smart. He's been within the past 4 months 3 times to USC to go talk with Lincoln Riley and go work out in LA.
I think Lincoln probably FaceTimes the guy every day.
So this is the chance for Matt Rule and the staff to really take an entire weekend. And yeah, you have a whole bunch of recruits you're going to be focused on, and you're going to say that we're focused equally on each one, but that's not the case. This weekend is for Dylan Raiola, because ask yourself, can this weekend really be a true success with all these high-level guys if Dylan is not in the boat as a Husker? If Dylan goes off to USC, do you think this recruiting weekend is going to matter to those 5 stars and high-level 4 stars that are in Lincoln? It could, sure, but the effect that it has if Dylan Raiola becomes a Nebraska commit is so much greater that Dylan Raiola is priority number 1, and you have an entire weekend to go build that relationship. And I think when it comes down to it, I've said it before, it appears as though Dylan grew up a Husker fan, and with Georgia, you have to go down and play in the SEC, and their track record with quarterbacks is all right, but not perfect. It's not as good as USC. That's the big selling point for USC. But with USC, you're going to have to go now, year in, year out, go play your childhood favorite team where your family is legendary. You want to go play Nebraska year in, year out after saying no to them on the recruiting trail after all their fans already fell in love with you? I mean, that's probably not top of mind with Dylan Raiola, but it's a factor that you have to think about, is that, you know what, they're going to the Big Ten. We're going to have to play Nebraska. Do you want to be that villain in Memorial Stadium when USC comes to town and you spurned Nebraska and went off to USC? Do you want to be that guy? That's going to be a factor. I think there are signs pointing towards Nebraska, but I think this weekend is going to be paramount for Matt Rule and the staff to go build a relationship and say, you know what? We are that family environment that you're looking for. We know you've wanted to be a Husker. It hasn't always looked great for you to come to Nebraska, but we're going to prove to you this weekend that this is the family you're looking for.
I think Rule and the staff with limited availability have been incredible, right? They've done all they can, what they can. The difference is Uncle Donnie and how close family is, and you're going to shoot him straight as the nephew, as a loved member of the family. Here's what I think we got going here. Here's what I think you can do. Here's what I think we can do for you. And I'm going to get you an offensive line that will get you 4 a carry and some play action ability. And I'm going to get you time in the pocket to carve up some defenses. It's going to be okay. That's you or whoever's playing quarterback. That's my job as offensive line coach. Yeah, I mean, Nebraska, for them to be in the thick of it, and I thought I saw a crystal ball maybe 2-3 weeks ago, either from 24/7 or from On3, that it was like 38 or 39% to USC. And then Nebraska was at 28%, Georgia was down. Listen, Nebraska has made up incredible ground despite not having communications with the head guy as much as Kirby Smart or as many visits to USC. For Nebraska to be where they're at is great. This is not moral victory hour either. So to your point about the dominoes, the residual effect with the other 24
The question I asked, can it be a success if Dylan Raiola is not a commit eventually?
Yeah, absolutely it can be, because, all right, so maybe you got the kids in because of Raiola, but you can keep them. You can make that impression yourself with your plan, with your vision, with that window that Evan was talking about. And whether maybe they just fall in love with the place whether Dylan's here or not. Maybe they think it is fit. Maybe they buy into, all right, what Rhule's got going. And there is, you would think, some availability to go compete and win a job. This is the culture I'm going to walk into. It's family again, the T-shirt that says family. Every college football, basketball, and football coach has one. But do you live what's on your chest, right? I mean, are you genuine to the carefully crafted image? I remember talking to a recruit that shall remain nameless, and it came down to Iowa State and Iowa for this player. And Iowa puts dudes into the league. You play in the front seven, you're going to probably play in the NFL if you start at Iowa. Iowa puts tight ends into the NFL. Now, Coach Campbell is going to have a couple of first or second round guys again this year. Iowa State didn't have the year they wanted, but what really sold this kid on Iowa State over Iowa was it's truly a family at Iowa State. It's a business decision at Iowa. That's how he put it to me. I think you're going to get all aspects from Coach Rhule as he'll connect, he'll relationship build, and he'll be pretty straightforward with the guy. Let's see how it shakes out this weekend. We'll have plenty of updates and info and thoughts come Monday. But really, really impressive. That's the bottom line. Is it's super impressive to be Nebraska where they are at, to have as many dudes, and we'll have that complete list on Friday for you. Some of the kids are coming in tomorrow night, so there'll be like a line change, so to speak, where you have some dudes in Thursday through Saturday and some guys Saturday through Monday.
And there was also Willis McGahee the fourth.
Yeah, Willis. Do you remember Willis?
I remember his dad.
Yeah.
I remember him briefly. He was very early in my life, but he was, I believe, already wrapped up his visit. I believe he was a Monday, Tuesday. And I believe
he's an edge guy. Mm-hmm. He's not a running back like Daddy. Daddy was incredible, and Daddy, despite his knee injury in the Fiesta Bowl, still went first round and had a good NFL career
and did well with the Broncos.
Yeah, he was solid. So we'll see where things shake out recruiting wise. We'll get you Jock Doc. It's on the way. Hail Varsity continues. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity Radio. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. Dr. Brandon, how we doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm still trying to recover after my bracket got a little busted this past weekend.
You and the world, my friend. You and the world. I know you have Princeton, so I'm proud of you there. I know.
I wish.
Lie to me.
Dr. Brandon, do you have any doctor's advice for a busted bracket? Rest, relaxation, elevation, ice? What do you say?
Pills.
We'll have to talk about that off camera.
Camera, yes. Kidding, of course.
A stiff glass of whiskey, I believe.
Local anesthetic. Yeah, right on. Well, hey, we're all just kind of hanging on for dear life with our bracket. Season's changing as well. Pitchers and catchers have been reported for a while. We're a week out from opening day, and the topic du jour is fractured forearm. Carson Kelly, talented ball player for the Diamondbacks. Dr. Brandon, he has a fractured forearm after getting hit by a pitch. This sounds absolutely nasty.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, a pretty rare incident in baseball, softball activities. Does happen. Usually it's kind of the original kind of description of this was what we call a nightstick injury. So you think about back in the day, the criminals got the forearm up, the police officer goes to use the baton. Back in the day, called a nightstick type injury. At any rate, this happens obviously with baseball, softball. What do you do if some of the ball's coming towards your face or a bat or something? You put your forearm up, and the forearm actually has two main bones, so we kind of go through our anatomy here. If you kind of trace up the back of your thumb and come onto the forearm, that's the radius. And if you move to the other side and kind of follow your small finger up to the outside, that's the ulna, and that's typically where these happen. And so you take a blunt force impact to that area and get a crack in the bone. Obviously, there can be a variety of these type of fractures that happen, most of which are you get a little crack in the bone that's non-displaced. It's sounding kind of like that's what his is, just based on what they're recommending for treatment. But you could have, something even more significant than that. I mean, think about how hard the baseball players are throwing at that level. You could, fracture all the way through the bone and essentially have significant displacement that might even need like surgical fixation.
Dr. Brandon, whenever you're looking at the sport of baseball in particular and how these guys do their at-bats, does it matter which arm this is in terms of what the recovery is going to look like for Kelly?
Yeah, it does. So if you think about, you're going to experience more force with that, basically that bottom hand on the bat with that rotation, because, basically that's where you're really kind of gripping the bottom of the bat. And you kind of get that final torque in your swing through. So that's going to transfer all that force to that kind of ulnar, we call the ulnar side of the forearm. And so it'd really be kind of that bottom hand is going to be their bottom arm is going to be the one that probably experiences more of the force through that area. If it's more your backhand, you're probably not quite getting the same. You'll have some, but the argument would be more the bottom hand. You probably get more force through it with the ulna.
It should be noted this is the right forearm of Carson.
Yes, yeah, it's the right forearm, which is that bottom torque. We're talking about that bottom arm. When we talk about the healing process, Dr. Brandon, with this, how do you determine whether you go do surgery? Is that an after the fact, after you put a cast on it? Do you put a cast on it? Do you air cast it? I mean, how do we go step 1 through step 3 here with just getting it set to heal?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So as you look at these, the majority of these heal well. Even some with a little bit of displacement, you can get these to heal pretty well in young, healthy patients, athletes. And so the majority of the time you're going to treat this non-operatively, which can involve, cast placement and transition out to maybe a little lighter splint, and then transition to, the joint kind of mobilization exercises after you kind of get this to heal in a couple of weeks. Some of these can be in an area where the blood supply is a little lacking, and so every once in a while you'll get one of these that doesn't heal, that you're treating non-operatively, then obviously that would prompt you to go in and do surgery on it. And then, of course, the big thing there, Chris, would be if somebody has a really displaced fracture, or maybe a fracture that's in a couple of different pieces, that would kind of tip your hat towards doing surgery. And then the final thing would be if somebody has essentially an open fracture where the skin's been broken and there's a fracture underneath, that's going to go to surgery. But again, the vast majority of these that we see, we're going to treat non-operatively in a cast. In terms of how long it takes to heal these, it's typically kind of 4 to 6 weeks is kind of the number that's there. Sometimes our young athletes will lay down bone very quickly over this area, and you figure you've got your radius supporting the other side of that forearm, and so some of these folks might get back to doing stuff by 4 weeks. If they're really laying down a lot of bone, that's being pretty aggressive. I would say most athletes, it's a good 6 or 8 weeks to get back.
How weak is this part of the arm and body? How much atrophy occurs with him being out of the lineup, being away from weights, all the stuff? Think of the work that catchers do, right? And just interested to know the recovery process to get back to square one, back to what he has been post-injury.
Yeah, the frustrating part, the frustrating part of these things is anytime you put, some type of extremity, whether it be forearm, leg, in a cast, you really do atrophy pretty quickly, so you lose that muscle mass pretty quickly. And so any type of mobilization he's going to go into, I'm assuming some type of cast. This is going to knock down some of that muscle tone that's there, and sometimes quite dramatically over a short amount of time. And so he'll definitely have some time to kind of build that back. And you think about getting back to that level and just having that key timing and having that strength and the speed that you need. And so it's going to take some time. I think it'd be a pretty optimistic outlook to see him back in 6 weeks. It could be longer. It could be 8 to 12 weeks before he's really back into that kind of tip-top catcher shape, hitting shape. Things are really, flowing well.
With the ulna injury, how's it going to affect Carson Kelly throwing the baseball from behind the plate? I mean, those catchers have to put a lot of force on a baseball to get it down to second base in time to catch some of the speedsters in the league. And how is that going to be affected by an ulna injury?
Yeah, that's a great question, Elijah. So if you think about that, where we see most of the force here, that's really tough is you're trying to get back to, for example, being a pitcher, trying to put all that different types of spin on the ball. That creates more of an issue because you start to get all that rotational force that goes through the end of that ulna and that kind of large triangular-shaped ligament that's there. And so throwing more kind of a straight kind of fastball, he'll probably get back to that fairly quickly. And yes, there'll be some soreness there, but I'm surprised how quickly some of these folks can get back to actually throwing and not having that much pain.
Is there going to be soreness or pain? And I'm thinking of him behind the plate, sticking the arm out, receiving the pitches, or having to be able to move to block a dirt ball or dive and keep a wild pitch from happening. Will there be any residual effect from this injury with just the normal responsibilities of a catcher?
Yeah, absolutely. You start to worry, especially that position. You think about all the positions in baseball, which one receives most of the contact. It's going to be your catcher. So you do worry about that with him. Obviously, a collision at home plate, could be an issue. A foul ball off the back of the bat, a foul tip could come down on the forearm. I would imagine they'll fashion some type of brace, orthosis, shield of some sort to kind of go over the forearm that still would allow him to throw, I would assume, or at least some kind of padding in the area, at least to give him some protection, especially that first 4 to 6 weeks when he's back.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Our topic, Diamondbacks catcher Carson Kelly, that fractured forearm. Dr. Brandon will holler soon. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Okay, fellas, take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
I do. Thank you very much. Back with us here on Hail Varsity, presented by Currency, Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right as we wind down a Wednesday. Busy show tomorrow. We're efforting one Jeremiah Searles. That'll be great.
Ooh.
Talk some spring ball and, of course, pro ball. Brandon Vogel with us. Gary Barnett will join us. Danny Burke said Michigan State. He said it 2 weeks ago. He said it last week. Danny Burke, the pride of Chicago. VSiN Sports Network will get you locked and loaded.
Well, we'll have to see if he put his money where his mouth was with Michigan State. That's the question.
Danny's probably eating shrimp cocktail right now.
It could be caviar.
Well, you ever had caviar?
I've always wanted to try it, but I've never wanted to pay for it. Like if one of my friends had some caviar, I'll try it. I hear it's just like a nice little salty kick to add to foods, which there's a lot of options out there. Caviar is just the one that gets kind of the big name brand recognition because it gets added to everything. It's just like it sounds. I don't want this to get clipped and quoted. It's like a little ball of saltiness.
No, that's fine.
A little egg of saltiness. Yeah,
I get it. Now, I had never had oysters.
Mm-hmm.
I had oysters. This is going to sound really uppity. I had oysters on Ted's yacht when we were in Ireland, off of the sea of the Eye of Ireland, right? Cue up Judge Smales, right? I did not have a sport coat on. I was not looking for gopher and dock. We were just out in the ocean on the Sunday after the international incident known as Nebraska Northwestern. And I had never had oysters. They were fresh. There's 50 seafood joints along the dock in the pier before you jump into the harbor and you go out. And this is all Creighton doing. It was great. Ted and his wife were wonderful. This was incredible. But I'd always wanted to try oysters. And you can't get them any fresher than where we got them. And I guess if you do oysters Rockefeller, they're a little cooked, whatever. But I had them. I had the Tabasco or the lemon. I did it the right way.
It's still gross.
But it did not do what I thought it would do. And that was, this is awesome. I'll never get oysters again. And it's nobody's fault, just not my thing. Give me mussels. I'm really a seafood loser. I don't know much about fish or seafood other than ahi tuna. That's about it.
We're from Nebraska. That's the way it should be.
The beer battered stuff. Coach Bairda's walleyes incredible. My God rest his soul, Grandpa Hunt's crappie, beer battered crappie, good, really good. But as far as the exotic fish, much like your caviar take, I'm that way with oysters.
I've had one in my life, and I thought the texture was the worst part. It's like weird and mucusy, and
it's a loogie.
It literally has the texture of a loogie, and it doesn't taste very good. And I go, man, I should have smothered this in more Tabasco. I wish this would have just tasted like Tabasco. Not great. Another a big one that always gets a lot of love. I don't quite get crawfish.
Never had it.
I've done a crawfish boil, and I was like, I'd rather have
overrated.
I'd rather have shrimp.
Sure, no, I get it. Crab legs are as really good as advertised. They are a pain in the ass, though, to try and do. Sorry, there's our honest moments.
Yeah, I'll stick with a steak though, for the most part.
We'll do.
Put a steak in front of me, or put any sort of
steak
seafood
and
in front of me.
Beer Friday. We need to revisit.
Yes,
this.
we do.
All right, back at 4 tomorrow with Hail Varsity. Thanks, Mike Babcock. A big thanks to Evan Bland.